Yes, sir.
Yes.
Audible.
I'm audible. Okay. So Yogesh, Yogesh has started recording the lecture. So thanks a lot. Let me now share the screen. And the first announcement I wish to make was that we now have a website for the course. And let me just share that website. So you can probably see the website. So in future, we will try to upload all the lecture notes and give link to the type of recordings and so on here itself. So kindly make note of this. Maybe, I mean, of course, the web address is visible here, so you don't need to separately make note of it. Once the recording is done, then you will also be able to access the recording and go back and look up the web page. So just wanted to announce that before I get started with the technical stuff for today's class. Now let us start with the technical material. So I have tried to align the camera better today. Just a moment. Okay, so let me get started. Okay, the topic of today's lecture is rotation matrices. And before we talk about rotation matrices, let us briefly recap whatever we discussed in the previous lecture. So we considered the case of acceleration of a point P on a rigid body. So if a rigid body is rotating about a certain point Q, so it is fixed about the point Q and it is rotating, and this is a point P. Then if you have any questions, kindly interrupt and speak out. I'll not be able to view any messages that you post while I'm giving the lecture. So just speak out, okay? If you have any issues with this, yes.
Have this pop-up one that hide and share. This window is coming that you just hide.
Okay. Better?
Yeah, sir.
Yeah. So we saw that the acceleration of the point P double dot was equal to alpha cross P plus omega cross P. So this was due to angular acceleration. And this was the centripetal term. So more generally, if that point Q is not at the origin, then we would have this to be QP double dot equal to alpha cross QP plus omega cross QP. And the actual acceleration of P would then be equal to the acceleration of Q plus the acceleration of QP. That would be the relationship if the point P, the point Q was also moving about. The second scenario that we considered was the one where you had a particle moving on a rigid body relative to the rigid body. So we considered that particle to be R. And again, we assumed to start with that the point Q was fixed, which is a reasonable assumption because translational motion is quite easy to understand and analyze, whereas rotational motion requires a little bit more math. So we saw that R dot, the velocity in the coordinate frame x, fixed inertial coordinate frame x and y, was equal to omega cross R plus V relative. V relative represents the relative velocity with respect to the rigid body of that particle R. And we saw that the analysis is facilitated by choosing a second coordinate system. So the first one we shall call XA, YA, and the second coordinate system which is fixed to the body, which I'll call xb, yb, and zb. So this coordinate system rotates along with the rigid body, and therefore measures the motion of the particle only relative to the rigid body. The motion of the rigid body itself is not measured if one were sitting and moving along with this coordinate frame. This could be used to derive the acceleration of that point r to be equal to alpha cross r plus omega cross r plus a relative, which is the relative acceleration of that point P with respect to that rigid body, plus 2 omega cross V relative. So we saw that this was again due to angular acceleration. This was a centripetal term. This was relative acceleration. And this was a Coriolis term. Coriolis acceleration. So this was relatively unfamiliar to us, whereas the other terms were relatively clear, intuitively clear. So we talked a little bit about Coriolis acceleration and its associated Coriolis force, which we defined as minus of m times the acceleration, 2 times omega cross V relative, which turns out to be 2 times m times V relative cross omega, because A cross B is minus B cross A. So this guy we saw had a major effect on very many things on our planet, including creation of cyclones or hurricanes, then the trade winds. Then we talked about how it is exploited by insects to determine their angular velocity and control the angular velocity subsequently. So there were these organs. I didn't mention the name of these organs at that point. They are called halters. Halteres. Halters. Then we also saw how it played an important role in physics by through the Foucault's pendulum. I didn't have time to discuss this in detail, but I mentioned it in the lectures. Foucault's pendulum, which established that Earth was actually rotating about itself, and it was not the heavens that were rotating about Earth. So again, we can generalize this expression for the case when the point Q is not fixed but is itself moving, and that generalization is very similar to the one that we have done for that point P there. So the generalization is that R double dot is equal to Q double dot plus QR double dot, and QR double dot essentially would be the expression here. In this expression, I have to replace R with QR if R is if the point Q is not fixed, and then I would use this final expression to obtain the absolute acceleration of that moving particle R in an inertial coordinate system. Now, as I said, today's topic is about rotational matrices. Where do these rotational matrices come in? The rotational matrices enter into our discussion. They become important to us because we recognize the importance of the second coordinate frame, xb, yb, that I have defined here. So there was some discussion that we had last time about the optional nature of this coordinate system for that specific problem that we were discussing, namely velocity, derivation of the velocity of that point R with respect to an inertial coordinate frame. But then its importance became more apparent when we were trying to derive the acceleration. And let me give a few more examples where the second coordinate system is really useful, and therefore build motivation for having to live with a second coordinate system, xp, yb, zb. And this coordinate system would be fixed to the rigid body. So it would move and rotate along with the rigid body. So now that this coordinate system exists, we have to somehow relate this coordinate system to the inertial coordinate system, xa, ya, za, because Newton's laws are valid in inertial coordinate frame. So we would therefore need to relate the two, and it is in trying to relate these two that rotation matrices become important. Now the role played by rotation matrices in relating these two coordinate frames is not very different from the role played by vectors and cross product definitions in relating the acceleration of a point r in 3D to the angular velocity and the position vector and so on and so forth. What is the role played by our definition of a vector or a definition of a cross product? One of the most important roles they play is in notational simplicity, is in making the equations look very compact and transparent so that we can focus only on the physics and not get lost in algebra. Okay, so that is one very important role that these definitions of a vector or a cross product play in writing down the acceleration of a point P or a point R in 3 dimensions. To reinforce this point, because this point directly connects with the reason why we would want to have rotation matrices in the first place. Again, for notational simplicity and for transparency and so on, so that we don't need to worry about algebra while we are thinking about physics. Let me first, to prove the point that our invention of cross product and vectors and so on has helped to simplify the expression for the acceleration. Let us assume that we did not invent vectors, we did not invent cross product and so on, but we just decided to write out 3 equations. You remember that r double dot here is a vector equation. It's actually 3 scalar equations put together, right? So if I were to, let me just for the sake of illustration and comparison, write out just one of these scalar equations to show you how much more complicated it would look if we did not have these very elegant and clever notations of vectors and cross products, definitions and notations, vis-a-vis if we had them. Okay, so let me first write down, let us focus on this expression here. This is a vector equation, but let us say I were to write one of its scalar equations. Only along the x-axis I were to write down this equation. This is how the equation is going to look. Okay, Rx double dot is a scalar quantity. Okay, this is the acceleration along the x-axis is equal to alpha y rz minus alpha z ry plus omega y times omega x ry minus omega y rx plus omega z times omega x rz minus omega z rx plus a relative along the x-axis, which I have called as a relative x, subscript x, plus 2 times omega y v relative along the z-axis minus omega z times v relative along the y-axis. Okay. Now, let us pause for a minute and compare the complexity of this expression with the one that we have written here. Notice that we are not done here. This is just the equation relating the acceleration along the x-axis to various different, omega x and omega y and so on and so forth. We would have 2 more such expressions. Ry double dot would have a similar lengthy expression. Rz double dot would have an equally lengthy expression. So let us just count the number of symbols that we have, even in the very first expression. Okay, we have Rx, Ry, Rz, 3 symbols. Omega x, omega y, omega z, 3 more symbols. Vx, vy, vz, another 3 symbols. Okay, only vy and v relative z and v relative y are represented. So only 2 symbols, and then a relative x. So how many? 6 plus 2 plus 1, 9 symbols. Plus there are various complicated multiplications and additions between them. So there are 9 symbols here, and then on the right hand side you have one more symbol, Rx. Oh no, Rx double dot. Okay, so let us assume, for the sake of illustration, that we have 10 symbols in this equation. Our mind has to pay attention to 10 symbols just to keep track of what the acceleration is along the x-axis. Now, if I were to write out the expressions for Ry double dot and Rz double dot in a similar manner, I would have 10 more symbols in each of them. So ultimately, therefore, I would have to pay attention to probably 30 symbols and the relationships with respect to one another if I did not have the definitions of the cross product or the definition of a vector in the manner that we have been taught in the past. Okay, this is the level of difficulty in algebra that we would have to plod through in the absence of the notational simplifications introduced by vectors and cross products. Okay. Now compare that with this beautifully elegant expression. Okay. It may appear to have many more terms than we are comfortable with, but definitely it is nowhere near as complicated and as confusing as this full expansion that we have here. So does somebody have a question? If you have a question, yes.
Yeah, one of the students had a question. I will try and answer some of the ones. If it is bothering you, disturbing your teaching, I can try and answer those.
Well, I mean, I'm not able to see those questions if they're typing it. But
exactly.
if they unmute their mic and ask me, I can definitely stop my lecture briefly and answer them.
Okay, fine. Go ahead. Okay. So I thought I can answer it in the chat box. You go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Please go ahead. Either if it's in the chat box and you wish to do so, kindly go ahead. No issues.
Hello?
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, I have a question regarding the last lecture. What is the specific meaning of V relative dot? Last lecture you have explained that. V dot, yeah.
The V relative dot we talked about it, right? By definition, it is the rate of change of V relative in the inertial coordinate system. Okay, in the fixed coordinate system. That is the definition of V relative dot.
Okay, it's with respect to in it, but we write the explanation with respect to XB dot and YB dot, YB cap and XB cap. Mrs. Relative now.
The discussion about that, maybe we can talk again about it at the end of this class. So although we have written it in terms of XB cap and YB cap, we gave an interpretation of what that meant. Okay, we can talk about it at the end of this class today. Okay.
Sir, one other problem, sir. You have given example of turntable, no? In that you have given, you told that V relative direction will be toward the radial direction at the initial condition.
Yes.
It will be the fixed, no, sir. It will be while the turntable is rotating and the relative velocity will be means will be in vertical direction as we have discussed.
It will not. Again, this is not directly related to today's class, so I don't want to take up everybody else's time in answering this question. I will talk to you separately at the end of the class. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. So the point here was that this vector equation packages away a lot of complexity that is obvious in the scalar equations that we have written, and in a similar manner, we look up to rotation matrices to package away a lot of complexity associated with representing the orientation of this B coordinate frame with respect to the A coordinate frame. So that is the connection between the rotation matrices and some of the definitions that we have introduced in the past, such as the cross product and so on. So let us now, before we talk about this connection, before we introduce rotation matrices, let me build some more motivation for introducing this B frame. So one example was already apparent in last class's derivation. So having a frame attached to that helped us do our algebra correctly and get the correct expressions for acceleration when the particle is moving relative to the rigid body and so on. Furthermore, on many occasions, when the rigid body rotates, the kind of force that it's experiencing also rotates along with the rigid body by the same extent. So let me give an example of an aircraft. Okay. So if I were to model an aircraft as a rigid body, I have its wings here. Okay. So when the aircraft changes its orientation, of course, the direction of weight, changes with the orientation of the aircraft. But what about its lift and drag? The lift and drag that's experienced by an aircraft is dependent on the inclination of the wing, right? dependent on the and the inclination of the wing changes with that of the aircraft. So in the reference frame fixed to the aircraft, the directions of lift and drag remain fixed. Similarly, if you want to steer an aircraft, you would have rudder at the back, and then you would have an elevator to control its pitch angle, and then you would have an aileron to control its roll angle. So and rudder controls its yaw. Now, whenever you change the orientation of the aircraft by using one of these control surfaces, the force experienced by the aircraft also changes along with the control surfaces, right? So the force applied, the aerodynamic forces, therefore, that the aircraft experiences are fixed in the frame of reference of the aircraft and changes along with it and has no relation with the inertial frame that is fixed to the ground. The same kind of phenomenon happens also in a spacecraft. So if I take a cartoon of a satellite and I have some thrusters, maybe not a satellite, maybe some kind of a spacecraft, and I have some thrusters which allow me to control the pointing direction or the position of this aircraft in in outer space. When the orientation of this spacecraft changes, the thrusters are anyway fixed to the spacecraft, right? So they also rotate along with the spacecraft. So the direction of force applied by each of these thrusters is therefore fixed in the frame of reference of the spacecraft. Although they may be totally different, from one point to another in time, if we are making measurements of force and its components in the inertial reference frame. A third example is maybe with rotating machinery. So if I have an unbalanced plate, for example, that is fixed on a rotating shaft. So this shaft is rotating about its longitudinal axis. Okay. If I were to sit on the shaft, then the unbalanced forces and moments that are applied by this unbalanced load, it could be because the center of mass is offset from the axis of rotation. It could be because the axis of symmetry of this plate is not aligned with the axis of rotation. For whatever reason, there will be unbalanced torque and moments that will be applied on the bearings, that the bearings will feel if there is this imbalance in rotating machinery. And this imbalance is a starting point for understanding rotor dynamics and so on. So in the presence of these kinds of unbalanced loads, the magnitudes and the directions of the loads remain unchanged if I were to sit on this shaft and rotate along with it. So if I were to pick my coordinate frame as one that is fixed to this plate and the shaft, and which rotates along with the plate or the shaft, then in that coordinate frame, the magnitudes of forces and moments do not either change direction or magnitude. But since these are rotating, in the inertial coordinate frame of the lab, I see these changing these fixed moments and torques as manifesting as rotating moments and torques applied by this rotating unbalanced machinery, and that in turn results in a time varying reaction force along the x and y axis or even along the thrust direction at the location of the bearings. So you see from these examples that in many instances, the load that is experienced by a rigid body is often fixed in the frame of reference of the rigid body, and therefore it makes sense for us to define a coordinate system which is fixed to the rigid body, and that coordinate system is xb, yb, zb. Okay, and in that coordinate system, writing down the equations of motion gets simplified as a consequence of the fact that some of these forces and torque and so on are constants in that particular reference frame. Okay, not all of them are constants. For example, in the example of the aircraft itself, you see that the direction of weight mg is always pointed down. So that is aligned, that is fixed in the coordinate frame of the ground, right? But the aerodynamic loads are fixed to the coordinate frame of the aircraft. So it's not always the case that this simplification is possible, but on many occasions they are, and therefore we choose to go with a second coordinate system. But now that we have the second coordinate system, hopefully we have now convinced ourselves about the utility of the second coordinate system to analyze the dynamics of these rigid bodies. The most important question that we need to address is how do we relate this coordinate frame, the xb, yb, zb coordinate frame, to the xa, XA, YA, ZA coordinate frame. How do we relate the two? Because we need this relationship because our Newton's laws and so on are, this is our home, right? As far as mechanics is concerned, Newton's laws are valid in inertial coordinate system. Okay, so this XA, YA, ZA is our inertial coordinate system. XB, YB, ZB is this frame that we have attached to the rigid body and moves with the rigid body. And we have done that for the sake of convenience, as evident from the examples that I have given earlier. But then we have to be able to relate the components of force or angular velocity or linear velocity or angular acceleration, linear acceleration, all these things that we express in the B coordinate frame to the corresponding components in the A coordinate frame. Okay, so that we are sure that we are writing down our equations, dynamical equations correctly. So how do we do this, transformation of vectors represented in the B coordinate frame to vectors in the A coordinate frame? The differences in this coordinate frames are twofold. One is there's a difference in the location of the origin of the B coordinate frame with respect to the A coordinate frame. The second is there's a difference in the orientation of the B coordinate frame with respect to the A coordinate frame. Now, if you are dealing with just a single rigid body and that rigid body is not really tethered to our inertial frame by means of some kind of a, by another set of rigid bodies or by some string or a spring or whatever, then none of the forces experienced by the rigid body are really dependent on the distance of the origin of the B frame with respect to the A frame. So it is when we write down the dynamical equations, we are relating forces to either velocities or accelerations or so on. And these forces, if they don't depend on this distance, then this offset is really not of much consequence as far as writing down the dynamical equations is concerned. So what we will therefore focus on, and this is valid for a single rigid body, though not for a multi-body system. So in case of a single rigid body, therefore, we shall assume that the B frame and the A frame's origins are coincident. Again, because this offset is irrelevant from the point of view of analysis, it's an arbitrary offset. But the orientations, however, have to be taken into proper account. The B frame changes its orientation as the rigid body moves about, and one needs to properly connect velocities and accelerations represented in the B frame to those represented in the A frame. So therefore, the first assumption we'll make, for the reasons that I just outlined, is that the A frame, XA, YA, ZA, and B frame, YB, XB, ZB, their origins are coincident. Let us remove this offset out of our minds and focus only on the difference in orientations between these two coordinate frames. And now we need to properly represent a vector in the B coordinate frame, in the A coordinate frame, if we have its representation in the B coordinate frame. So let us first see how that can be done with just the tools that we have available to us so far. So let us take the position vector P itself. How would we represent it in the B frame? We would write it in terms of its components along the XB, YB, and ZB axis. Px, XB cap, Py, YB cap, plus Pz, ZB cap. Okay. Now the same vector can also be written in the A frame. Px prime, XA cap, plus Py prime, YA cap, plus Pz prime, ZA cap. So we need to properly obtain Px prime, Py prime, Pz prime, given Px, Py, and Pz. So this P could be replaced by a velocity vector or an acceleration vector or an angular velocity vector. The problem remains the same. Representing a vector resolved into its components in the B frame correctly in the A frame. Okay, how do we go about doing it? Well, with the tools that we have, the procedure would be to represent this unit vector XB in terms of the unit vectors XA, YA, ZA. Similarly, YB, Y cap B in terms of, again, X cap A, Y cap A, Z cap A. And similarly also Z cap B in terms of these three unit vectors. So I can write therefore, Px, I can write X cap B as maybe alpha 1 x cap a plus alpha 2 y cap a plus alpha 3 z cap a. I can just resolve this unit vector along the xb direction into its components along the xa, ya, and za axes, and those components are alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. Then I repeat that for py, and I would have, let us say, alpha 4 xa cap. So yb cap now has to be represented in terms of xa, ya, and za. So alpha 4 xa cap, alpha 5 ya cap plus alpha 6 za cap. So I've represented now yb cap in terms of xa, ya, za, unit vectors along xa, ya, za. Then pz times similar thing, alpha 7 xa cap plus alpha 8 ya cap plus alpha 9 za cap. Now what do? I group these terms properly. I combine, I group all the terms that are connected with the x component along the a direction. The component along the xa direction. So px times alpha 1 plus py times alpha 4 plus pz times alpha 7. The three put together would give me the x component of the vector p in the a coordinate frame, and that should be therefore equal to px prime. Okay. So if I'm given this, therefore vector, these numbers px, py, pz, I need to carry around with me these 9 numbers, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, alpha 4, alpha 5, alpha 6, all the way to alpha 9. I need to carry around with me these 9 numbers to convert any vector represented in the b coordinate frame properly into vectors represented in the a coordinate frame. Any questions about this? And we are therefore confronted with the same confusing algebra that we need to undertake. The lack of elegance and clarity that sets in because of these, this 9 different numbers that we need to remember before we can convert a vector represented in the B frame to a vector represented in the A frame. So just as we sought elegance and simplicity in moving from scalar equations to vector equations, we similarly seek elegance and simplicity in packaging in representing these 9 numbers better. Okay, that forms the motivation for introducing this rotation matrix. Any questions?
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so my actual doubt is with regards to the earlier statement where you said that the rigid body represented by the coordinate frame x, xb, yb, zb is independent of the inertial coordinate frame. So would that be something similar to how two different rigid bodies in space, they each have their own coordinate system, whereas for a mechanism, you have for a mechanism or linkage, essentially you have 4 bodies connected with some joint or the other. Those kind of bodies with their own coordinate systems are not the generalization that you're talking about here, right?
Well, the goal is to ultimately define, in the manner that you just talked about. If you have a mechanism with multiple rigid bodies, it is ideal for us to slap a coordinate system to every single one of those rigid bodies, and then finally relate those coordinate frames, their positions and velocities of some point in those coordinate frames to that in the inertial coordinate frame. Okay, that is the ultimate goal. But mechanisms are an interconnection of rigid bodies. So before we look at an interconnection of rigid bodies, let us first look at a single rigid body in space. And for that, we just define one coordinate frame, xb, yb, zb.
Right, but if it was a mechanism and we're supposed to be
coordinate frames, and we will discuss that maybe in the second month, not in October. In November, we'll discuss that. Each one will have its own coordinate frame.
And the distances between the origins would also have to be taken into account there.
Very much matter. The distances between the origins very much matter. And that's why we also introduce a new transformation called as a homogeneous transformation that will package away that complexity also better. Okay?
Yeah, okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Sir,
so let us
talk about this first one second. This term. Alpha terms that you introduced, no? Alpha 1, alpha 2. Briefly, once again.
What briefly what they are, is it? What do you want to know?
Yes, sir. Yes.
What are they? So I have replaced XA with, sorry, I have replaced XB with alpha 1 XA plus alpha 2 YA plus alpha 3 ZA. In other words, I have represented the unit vector X cap B as a linear combination of the unit vectors X cap A, Y cap A, and Z cap A. I have resolved the vector X cap B into its components along the X cap A, Y cap A, Z cap A axis. And when I resolve them, those components, the size of those components are alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3.
Got it.
Okay, yeah. Any other question? Okay, in that case, we'll proceed. So, before we start talking about rotation matrices, so far, we have used the notation of unit vectors X cap A, Y cap A, and Z cap A, or X cap, Y cap, and Z cap. Okay, to represent a vector. So we write down a vector as a linear combination of some components along each of these vectors, unit vectors, X cap, Y cap, and Z cap. Now this framework is rather restrictive when it comes to analysis of general rigid body motion, especially when it comes to representation of orientation. As you could see in the previous slide, I need to remember some 9 numbers if I were to continue to swear by this representation. And I can only carry 3 numbers in my mind, when I have this notation, when I'm using this notation, namely the components along the X cap, Y cap, and Z cap directions. So what I do instead is I stop representing vectors using these unit vector notations, but instead I resort to representing them by taking help from vector algebra, by taking help from matrices. So, for example, if I look at a column matrix, a 3x1 column matrix, okay? So let me take a point P as Px, X cap, plus Py, Y cap, plus Pz, Z cap. Let that be that point P. Okay. Now let me, instead of representing P in this particular manner, let me represent it as a column matrix. We'll soon call it a column vector, but now we'll continue to call it a column matrix because that's the language that you are familiar with. So this is Px, Py, Pz. Let me represent it this way. Okay. Now, if there's another position vector Q, which is Qx, X cap, and Qy, Y cap, and Qz, Z cap. When I have to add these 2 vectors, P plus Q, what do? I add only their corresponding X and Y and Z components, right? Px plus Qx, X cap, plus Py plus Qy, Y cap, plus Pz plus Qz, Z cap. This is how I end up adding 2 vectors. Now, if I were to instead represent P by means of this column matrix, okay, and Q also by a corresponding column matrix, Qx, Qy, Qz. Again, a 3x1 matrix. If I add P and Q, what are the rules of addition for matrices? Again, the corresponding entries in the matrix alone get added, right? So this becomes Px plus Qx, Py plus Qy, Pz plus Qz. So you already see that there is no difference between representing a vector this way and representing a vector that way as far as addition of 2 vectors is concerned. I'm going to get the same result, except that I have now gotten rid of these X cap, Y cap, and Z cap symbols. Similarly, if I were to multiply a vector with a scalar, some alpha times P, what does that mean? I would be representing every single component by the same scalar, alpha times Px, alpha times Py, alpha times Pz. If instead I were to represent the vector by means of a column matrix, as I have shown here, and I multiply this scalar with this matrix, again, the way the product of a scalar and a matrix is defined, we note that this is nothing but alpha Px, alpha Py, alpha Pz. So we see therefore that as far as scalar multiplication is concerned and vector addition is concerned, there's really no difference whether I choose to represent it using unit vectors or using a column matrix. Okay. So in place of therefore continuing to stick with this X cap, Y cap, Z cap notation, I shall get rid of that, and from this point forward, I shall represent vectors using column matrices, and these column matrices, in fact, because I'm using them for representing vectors, I shall rename them as column vectors. Okay. So why am I doing this? Because vectors are a far more powerful and more general mathematical instrument, mathematical tool compared to unit vectors. Okay. So matrices, I can, I don't need to confine myself to just a 3x1 column matrix. I can have a 6x1 column matrix, 10x1 column matrix. What does it physically mean is something that we may not be able to appreciate at this point, although we can infuse physical meaning into such matrices as well at a later point. But the fact remains that matrices are far more general than vectors, and therefore we jump ship from representing vectors using unit vector notation to representing them using column matrices, and we call those column matrices, we rename them as column vectors. Okay. Now, as far as relating two coordinate frames that are oriented differently with respect to one another is concerned, from this point forward, we'll use this column vector notation to relate the x and y components in the A frame to those in the B frame. So let us first do it for the planar case. Let us assume that you have xa, ya here, and another coordinate frame xp, yb. And here is a point P in space. I can resolve this point P into its x and y components in the A frame, which will be this one and that one. Okay, or its x and y components in the B frame. So I have to project this vector along the x and y axes to get its x and y components in the B frame. In future, what I shall do is, if I were to represent this vector P in the A frame, to keep track of what frame I'm representing it in, I shall attach a superscript on the left-hand side. Okay, this superscript represents the fact that I'm representing, indicates the fact that I'm representing this vector in the A frame, and that is given by the x component of the vector represented in the A frame and the y component of the vector represented in the A frame. Now, a vector can be represented in any number of frames. Each of them oriented differently with respect to the previous one. So I can also represent the same vector P in the B frame. Okay, so that would be the x component of the vector represented in the B frame will be Pxb, and the y component will be Pyb. Okay. Now, what we are out to do is to somehow relate these two by not using the 4 numbers as we did with the unit vector notation, but by using a more compact entity, a more compact symbol. Okay, so how do we relate these two? Before we do that, let us briefly go back to the unit vector notation so that it becomes clear how we can go from the representation of a vector in the A coordinate system to representation of a vector in the B coordinate system. This I have just taken a position vector for illustration, but this could very well be a velocity vector or an acceleration vector or any other vector. Okay, so I have PA in the unit vector notation to be equal to PAX XA cap plus PAY YA cap by definition. Similarly, the unit vector represented in the B coordinate frame, I have attached the superscript on the left-hand side. That's equal to PBX XP cap plus PBY YB cap. Okay. Now I can undertake the same algebra that I did earlier. I can represent XA cap, XP cap in terms of XA cap and YB cap in terms of YA cap. Repeat that simplification. So this will be equal to PBX. What is XB cap in terms of XA cap and XP cap? So if I have a unit vector along XB, that's XP cap, I can resolve that into its components along XA and YA. And what will that be? If the angle between these two coordinate frames is theta, then XB cap is nothing but XA cap cos theta plus ya cap sine theta. So these are the components of this vector along x and y axes of the a coordinate system. Similarly, the y component will be pby times yb cap. If I look at yb cap, that unit vector is something like that, yb cap. I resolve it into the x and y components in the a coordinate system. You see that the x component in the a coordinate system is negative, and therefore it will be minus sine theta xa cap plus cos theta ya cap. So this is a representation of B in the B coordinate frame, but to represent it in the A coordinate frame, I now represent x cap B, y cap B in terms of x cap A and y cap A as I have done here. Okay, now I simplify that. So when I simplify, I will get that Px represented the B coordinate system will be, now since I am representing it in the A coordinate system, it will be P represented in the A coordinate system. That will be equal to Px in the B coordinate system cos theta minus Py in the B coordinate system sin theta times xa cap plus Px in the B coordinate system sin theta plus Py in the B coordinate system cos theta ya cap. And that by definition is Px a xa cap plus Py a ya cap by definition, right? So therefore, if I were to individually equate the x and y components, I would have that Pxa is equal to Pxb cos theta minus Pyb sin theta, and Pya is equal to Pxb sin theta minus Pyb cos theta. Now I can write this slightly better because I have now decided to go with matrices and vectors. I can write this as Pxa Pya is equal to cos theta minus sin theta cos theta times Pxb Pyb. So this set of two equations can be replaced by just this one single equation where the vectors on the right hand side, the column vector on the left hand side is connected to the column vector on the right hand side through this 2 by 2 matrix. Okay. And no matter which vector I pick, see this, I did not specify what Pxa and Pya was. It could be any general point represented in the A coordinate system. And this is its representation in the B coordinate system of the same general point P. Okay. The two can be related by means of this matrix. Okay. What is this matrix? What are the entries of this matrix? The first term is cos theta. And if you notice, cos theta is the angle between, cos theta is a cosine of the angle between the vectors x cap A and x cap B. So this is x cap B dot x cap A. Okay. And the second term is sin theta, and that is the inclination between x cap B and y cap A. So if I were to show you this figure here, x cap B and x cap A are oriented with respect to each other by this angle theta. X cap B and y cap A are oriented with respect to each other by this other angle, which is 90 minus theta. So if I were to take the dot product of these two vectors, I would get x cap B, magnitude of x cap B, magnitude of y cap A times cosine of 90 minus theta, which is sin theta. Okay, which is exactly what I have at the bottom here. Similarly, the other term here is y cap B dot x cap A, and the last term is y cap B dot y cap A. This is the matrix that relates the representation of a given vector in the B coordinate frame to its representation in the A coordinate frame. Okay, so since each of these terms are the cosines of the angles between those particular unit vectors. So the first term is a cosine of the angle between x cap B and x cap A. The second is a cosine of the angle between x cap B and y cap A, and so on and so forth. Each of these terms are called direction cosines. So for a 2 by 2 matrix, I have 4 direction cosines. I'll have 9 direction cosines if I have a 3 by 3 matrix. Okay. So what to actually represent? So let us first, if P is given by Px, Py, Pz, we note that this is nothing but the dot product of x P with x cap. The x component, the first entry in this column vector, is the dot product of P with x cap. The second entry is the dot product of P with y cap. The third entry is the dot product of P with z cap, right? That is, those comprise, these 3 entries are related to the vector P and the unit vectors by this equation here. So similarly, if you look at this equation here, I have xb dot x cap A and as a first term and xp dot y cap A as a second term. So therefore, that is nothing but if you were to replace x cap B in the location of P here, and you were to assume that this was a planar problem and you didn't have the third dimension, then the first 2 entries here in the first column is nothing but it's a vector which is the representation of the unit vector x cap B in the A coordinate system. Okay, so if you have one column vector which essentially is the representation of x cap B in the A coordinate frame, in the components of the column vector form the top and the bottom entries of this 2 by 2 matrix. Similarly, the second 2 entries, y cap B dot x cap A and y cap B dot y cap A, if I were to take them separately and view them as another column vector, then that column vector would be nothing but the representation of y cap B in the A coordinate system. Exactly from the definition that I have given here. No difference. Any questions about this?
Sir, once more you just this how you relate now. Just once more you relate, sir, little bit.
Okay.
You have related this P vector with this cosine, direction cosine now. So just once more, just you explain, sir.
Okay. So is this equation clear? P vector is by definition Px.
This is clear, sir. This is clear. No issue.
Okay. Now let us say we are dealing with the A coordinate system. Then I'm representing P in the A coordinate system. What will this be? P x A cap. That's the x component. And then the y component will be P dot ya cap. The z component will be P dot za cap. If I have a 3 by 3 problem, here I have a 2 by 2 problem, in which case I will have only P dot xa cap as the first entry of this column vector, P dot ya cap as the second entry of the column vector. So let us choose P to be equal to x cap B, the unit vector along the x-axis of the B coordinate frame. Then what do I get this to be equal to? Is nothing but x cap B dot x cap A. The second term will be x cap B dot y cap A, right? If P were chosen to be equal to x cap B. But what is that equal to? It is nothing but the representation of x, the vector x cap B in the A coordinate frame. So that's why I have written this here. Is that clear?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, clear.
So similarly, the second column. So this 2 by 2 matrix can be viewed as a concatenation of 2 columns. I have placed 2 columns one beside another. The first column is this column vector, the x cap B represented in the A coordinate system. The second vector is this the second column vector is y cap b represented in the A coordinate system. Okay. For the more general case of representing a vector in 3D, what we would have is that if I were to have a vector p with components along x, y, and z axes in 3D in the A coordinate system, the way I relate the components px, py, pz in the A coordinate system to the components px, py, pz in the B coordinate system, which are represented by means of these left-hand side superscripts, is by means of another matrix full of direction cosines, which are the dot products of the unit vectors of the A coordinate system with the unit vectors of the B coordinate system. So this will be x cap b dot x cap a. This will be x cap b dot y cap a, x cap b dot z cap a. The second column will be y cap b dot x cap a, y cap b dot y cap a, y cap b dot z cap a. The third column will be z cap b dot x cap a, z cap b dot y cap a, z cap b dot z cap a. Okay. So I can now represent a vector in the A coordinate system and relate it to its representation in the B coordinate system by means of this matrix. Okay. And this matrix is called as the rotation matrix R. Okay. So now this was what we were looking for. This was the simplicity in notation and packaging away of complexity that we were hoping to get. So those 9 components that we talked about earlier, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, all the way to alpha 9, are nothing but, x cap b dot x cap a, x cap b dot y cap a, and so on and so forth. Okay. So instead of carrying around these 9 components in a bag, I now have dignified them in some sense by placing them at appropriate locations in this 3x3 matrix. And from this point forward, I shall not separately carry them around. Just as I gave up carrying around 3 equations by replacing them with one vector equation, I dispense with carrying around 9 separate numbers and instead replace them by one single symbol. And this is a matrix, and this is a 3x3 matrix, and it's called as a rotation matrix. Okay, R. And the way we represent this rotation matrix, since we are trying to relate the representation of a vector in the B frame to the representation of the vector in the A frame, is that we put a subscript B here and a superscript A there. So we are trying to look at the representation of a vector in the B frame with respect to A frame. That is how this subscript and superscript should be interpreted. So if I were to rewrite that nice expression, I would have P represented in the A frame to be equal to R, the rotation matrix of the rotation of the B or orientation of the B frame with respect to the A frame times P represented in the B coordinate frame. So this would be the way I would relate the representation of a vector in the B frame to the representation in the A frame. Now I can replace this vector P with some velocity vector or an acceleration vector to know how the components of those vectors resolved in the B frame can be related to the components resolved in the A frame. And I hope at this point you represent the beauty and the elegance of this new notation that we have introduced. Instead of those 9 numbers that we were carrying around to convert the representation of a vector in the B frame to its representation in the A frame, we now have just a single symbol and we have packaged away that complexity. Those 9 numbers are the entries of the of this 3x3 matrix or of B with respect to A. Okay, and this is called as a rotation matrix. Okay, so let us obtain the structure of this rotation matrix for some simple cases. So let us first take the case of rotation about the z-axis, which boils down to the in-plane rotation that we have been looking at so far. So if you have xa, ya, and the other coordinate frame is tilted with respect to this by an angle theta. In other words, I have rotated about the z-axis. I have to rotate about the z-axis by an angle theta in the counterclockwise sense to obtain the xb and yb and zb coordinate frame. So zb and za will be coincident. Only xa, only yb and zb will be tilted with respect to ya and za. What is the expression for RAB? So I wish to reinsert the definition, because by using the definition we can easily write down this expression. It's x dot b dot x cap b dot x cap a. That's the first entry of RAB, and that's cos theta. And the second entry is x cap b dot y dot a, and that is sin theta. And the third is x cap b dot z cap a. So if you see this figure here, since it's an in-plane rotation, z cap a and z cap b are aligned with respect to one another. So dot product of x cap b with z cap a will be 0, because these two vectors are orthogonal to one another. So I'll get 0 as the last entry in the first column. Similarly, if I were to use this definition, y cap b dot x cap a will be minus sin theta. Y cap b dot y cap a is cos theta as before. Again, this y cap b is perpendicular to z cap a. They're 90 degrees to one another, so the dot product goes to 0. And the last term is z cap b dot x cap a. So z cap b is aligned with z cap a because this is only in-plane rotation. So rotation only about the z-axis. So therefore z cap b is orthogonal to both x cap a and y cap a. And therefore the dot products would both be 0. And z cap a and z cap b are aligned with respect to one another, so that the dot product is 1. Okay, so this is the rotation structure of the rotation matrix. If I have the two coordinate frames tilted with respect to one another only about one axis, that is the z-axis. And I shall give this a special name. I shall call this R subscript z, but this time on the right hand side. Okay, and I need to rotate by an angle theta to go from one frame to another. So I shall call this R subscript z theta. So RAB is R subscript z theta. Okay. Similarly, if I have to rotate by an angle theta, but about y-axis to get from x coordinates, xa coordinate system to a coordinate frame to b coordinate frame, then I would have RAB. I don't want to do this in a step-by-step manner, but just by the definition of RAB and taking the dot products carefully, you can yourself show that RAB will be equal to cos theta 0 minus sin theta 0 1 0 sin theta 0 cos theta. Okay, so if A and B coordinate frames are related in such a way that I have to rotate by an angle theta about the y-axis of the A coordinate frame to get the B coordinate frame, then the corresponding rotation matrix that allows me to represent a vector in the A coordinate frame given its representation in the B coordinate frame is this one. This is I called R subscript y theta.
So Jayan sir, it's not visible here.
Yeah, I have now. Sorry. And the last one is representation of obtaining the rotation matrix when B and A are rotated with respect to one another about the x-axis. So if I have to rotate starting from the A frame, I have to rotate by an angle theta to get the B frame. Then again, the representation of the vectors in the two frames can be related by a rotation matrix that has this particular structure: 1 0 0 0 cos theta sin theta 0 minus sin theta cos theta. Okay, so these are the 9 entries, and when I'm writing down the equations, I will not separately write down these 9 entries. I simply represent them by Rz of theta. That's the notational simplification that the use of matrices helps us achieve. Okay, once again, just as vectors made equations look simple and beautiful, so do matrices make equations look simple and beautiful. Any questions?
So the last one should be Rx.
Pardon me?
The last one should be Rx.
That
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you, please. Can you repeat? The last one has to be.
Rx, na? Rx.
Oh, Rx. I'm sorry. Thank you. Rx.
Sir,
Yes.
those expressions are valid for only the origin for both frames should be coincident.
Not necessarily. I mean, whether they are coincident or not, it is immaterial. Okay. The orientation of one coordinate frame with respect to another coordinate frame does not depend on the position difference of one with respect to another. Okay.
If the origins are at the offset, expressions should be same.
Yes, will be the same. Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes. When you are representing a position vector, however, you have to take into account that offset. But as I said, in dynamics of a single rigid body, we are looking at resolving velocities and accelerations and so on, and relating those velocities and accelerations to corresponding forces represented in the B frame to those representations in the A frame. And in such a case, this offset will be immaterial, will not enter into the equations. So therefore, these equations will continue to be valid even if there is an offset in the origin between the B frame and the A frame. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have stumbled upon or invented this new symbol that makes representation of orientation very simple and compact, let us look at some of the properties of the rotation matrix. So let us first start with this equation, P represented in the A coordinate frame, the rotation matrix of B with respect to A times P represented in the B coordinate frame. First, you appreciate the elegance of this representation. So this is, it is reminiscent of, cancellation of cross terms when I'm writing out, a product of fractions. So for example, I can write 2 by 3 as 2 by 4 times 4 by 3, right? So I can remove 4 and then get the relation, get this term on the left hand side. Similarly, here also you see the way the representation is made. So P represented in the A frame is R of B with respect to A times P represented in the B frame. So I remove this. In some sense, I get P represented in the A frame. So this notation has been very carefully and cleverly chosen to avoid confusion while we are dealing with multiple reference frames and so on. Okay. So if I have A and B to be the same coordinate frame, okay, A and B are coincident. So A and B are coincident. Then what will PB and PA be? Do you agree with me that if A and B are coincident, then the representation of the point P in A and B coordinate frames will be identical? There will be no difference between them. So what does that tell us? The most important, the most fundamental fact is that the rotation matrix of B with respect to itself is an identity matrix. Very simple fact. So second property. So if I have 3 coordinate frames, and I will have many coordinate frames when we look at multi-body systems. So this is the A coordinate frame. This is the B coordinate frame. And this is the C coordinate frame. Okay. I would have that P represented in the A coordinate frame is equal to R for the sake of clarity. But when we are representing position vectors, I'm assuming that their origins are coincident. When you're representing velocities and so on, it really doesn't matter. So R of C with respect to A, PC. Okay. Now I can also choose to represent P in the B coordinate frame and relate that to A first. So I can write this as PA as R of P with respect to A, PB, and then the point P in the B coordinate frame can be related to its representation in the C coordinate frame by means of this particular matrix. So in these equations, if I were to replace PB with this expression, I would have PA is equal to R AB times R. Sorry, this is B. BC PC. Right. So if I compare this equation and this equation, PA is RAC PC and PA is RAB times RBC PC, I get that the rotation matrix of C with respect to A is equal to the product of the rotation matrix of B with respect to A with the rotation matrix of C with respect to B. Okay, so this is another property of the rotation matrices. Now this leads to another interesting or important result. So suppose A and C are coincident. Instead of A and B being coincident, let us say A and C are coincident. In other words, the coordinate frame C is aligned with coordinate frame A. Then what we would have is that RAC will be RA with respect to A, and that we saw was an identity matrix. Right? So therefore, we would have that R of AB times R of BC would be an identity matrix in this case. But as we discussed, R of BC is nothing but R of A with respect to B, because A and C are assumed to be coincident. So therefore, I would have R of B with respect to A times R of A with respect to B is equal to identity matrix. In other words, R of B with respect to A is R of A with respect to B inverse. Okay. Intuitively, you would expect this to be the case, and it turns out to be so. Okay. Any questions? This is all straightforward matrix algebra, so I don't expect that it would be very confusing. Then you must have learned in your undergrad that in general, two matrices do not commute. In other words, if I multiply two matrices A and B, A times B will not be equal to B times A if A and B are matrices. Similarly, two rotation matrices also do not commute. So if I were to, let us say, rotate about the x-axis by some angle θ1, and then there is another rotation. So RAB is this one and RBC is something else, let us say, RY of θ2 or some such thing. This is not equal to RY of θ2 times Rx of θ1. So if I were to interchange the sequence of applying these rotations, then the orientation of the coordinate frame B will not be the same as what I would get if it was applied the other way around. Okay, so these two matrices do not commute in general. However, if the axis of rotation is the same, then the two matrices do commute. Okay, so let us take, for example, Rz of θ1 times Rz of θ2. What does this practically mean? So I have an A coordinate system here, and then I have a B coordinate system, which is oriented with respect to the A coordinate system by an angle θ1. Okay. And I have a C coordinate system here. It is oriented with respect to B by an angle θ2. Okay, so this is XA, YA, XB, YB, XC, YC. Okay. So whether I rotate to get from A to C, I can either first rotate by θ and then by θ2, or rotate by θ2 and then by θ1, So in other words, rz of theta 1 times rz of theta 2 is nothing but rz of theta 2 times rz of theta 1. Okay, and both of them are equal to a single rotation of theta 1 plus theta 2. Okay, so this is nothing but rz of theta 1 plus theta 2. This is valid if I were to replace a subscript z with x or y. It's again valid. There are also, even if the rotation is not about x, y, or z axis, but about some other axis, if the axis is kept the same, but the angles of rotation are alone changed, then this kind of an a relationship would also be valid in that case. Any questions about this? So here's a very simple pictorial explanation. You can actually write down the full 3x3 matrix for rz of theta 1 and rz of theta 2, cross multiply and come to the same conclusion as what I have written here. But what I have written here does not require us to go through the dirty algebra. By simple intuitive understanding of what the product of these two mean, it is essentially representing the orientation of the c coordinate frame with respect to the a coordinate frame, where the c coordinate frame is rotated by theta 1 plus theta 2 about the z axis of the a coordinate frame. That's equivalent to rotating by theta 1 first and theta 2 next, or theta 2 first and theta 1 next. They're both equivalent and are in turn both equivalent to rotating altogether by this angle theta 1 plus theta 2. Okay, so one special case of this is when theta 1 plus theta 2 is 0. In other words, I rotate from a coordinate system by theta 1 to get the b coordinate system, and I rotate back by minus theta 1 to get back the a coordinate system. So I would therefore have rz of theta 1 plus theta 2 to be equal to rz of 0, and that, as you might intuitively expect, if I rotate in one direction and rotate back in the opposite direction, I would get the same vector representation again. So rz of 0 is an identity matrix. In other words, rz of theta 1 times rz of minus theta 1, which is if theta 1 plus theta 2 is 0, then rz of theta 1 times rz of theta 2 is nothing but rz of theta 1 times rz of minus theta 1. That's equal to the identity matrix, or rz of minus theta 1 is equal to rz of theta 1 inverse. Okay, if I were to replace z with x or z with y, the same kind of equation would be valid. Any questions?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, the coordinate system C, we got rz of theta 1 plus theta 2. Then why it is written that rz of theta 1 into rz of theta 2? Because theta 2 is basically from xb to xc and not from xa to x. But by the definition, theta should be from xa only, no?
No, this theta is measured about ZA, right? So see, if you go back to this expression here, R of C with respect to A is R of B with respect to A times R of C with respect to B, right? Now, if I have to rotate by theta 1 to get from the A coordinate frame to B coordinate frame, then R of B with respect to A is RZ of theta 1. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Similarly, if I have to rotate by theta 2 to get from B to C, then R of C with respect to B is RZ of theta 2. Okay, so therefore, RZ of theta 1 times RZ of theta 2 is basically R of B with respect to A times R of C with respect to B. But from this equation here, we see that it's the same as R of C with respect to A. So what is R of C with respect to A? To get to, we have to, from starting from the XA axis. Therefore, that's nothing but RZ of theta 1 plus theta 2.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir. I got it.
All right. So then I have one last property. Maybe I have two properties here, but I will maybe focus on just one of them on account of us having only 3 minutes remaining. So what is the structure of R of B with respect to A, it is X cap. I'll, instead of writing it out again in all its glory, I shall just point to the expression here. This is R of B with respect to A, right? So if I were to take the transpose of this matrix, what do I get? Sorry, R of B with respect to A is this matrix. R of A with respect to B is this matrix. Again, I just need to exchange A and B in this equation. So this will be X cap A dot X cap B, X cap A dot Y cap B, X cap A dot Z cap B. This is Y cap A dot X cap B, Y cap A dot Y cap B, Y cap A dot Z cap B, Z cap A dot X cap B, Z cap A dot Y cap B, Z cap A dot Z cap B. This is R of B with respect to A. Now, if you look at R of A with respect to B and look at R of B with respect to A, you stare at both of them for a minute or two, you will see that maybe I will place them one beside another so that you can see both of them. I'm not able to place them very well. I'm sorry. Maybe I should try this. Okay. I've done a slightly better job, but still not very good. Okay. You can look at it later on. Okay. So the point I was trying to make, the observation here is that R of B with respect to A is R of A with respect to B. Sorry, R of A with respect to B is R of B with respect to A transpose. And we saw that R of A with respect to B is also equal to R of B with respect to A inverse. Okay. So in other words, R of B with respect to A inverse is simply its transpose. Okay, so that's another nice property. So such matrices are called unitary matrices. We will talk about one. Hello, am I audible? Can someone unmute their mic?
Yes,
Hello.
sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, I couldn't hear the earlier.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'll just write down the last bit here. So I have these 9 entries, right? So each of these columns is orthogonal to the other column. That's obvious because R of B with respect to A, for example, is X cap of B represented, X cap of B represented in the A frame.
Sir, your screen is not visible, I guess.
Pardon me?
Screen is not visible to me.
Screen is, oh, I think there's no internet here at MMCR. So that's why the screen is not visible. Then we will stop at this point.
Yeah.
I shall, if you cannot see the screen, there's nothing that we can do. We cannot proceed further. So we will continue pick up from here in the next class. Okay. If there are any questions, you guys can ask me.
Sir, you can download the attendance.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah. Thanks a lot. You guys can view that. Yes.
Sir, actually, last lecture, sir, we log out earlier because our lecture was there. So you downloaded attendance, sir. So I was not there in that attendance because I shifted to the thermodynamics. Our class was there actually.
Okay. Okay.
So that's why I told you, sir, attendance. If you are considering that I was there, but you may not have taken me because of I log out early, some 5 minutes before.
Okay, it's all right. So now you have entered, right? I will. Your Dinesh Kumar Agarwal, is it not?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I will make sure that you get your attendance for the first class, or for the previous class.
Yes, sir. Because I log out early. Sir.
Okay. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
same problem with me also, Ajinkya.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Can you guys kindly send Yogesh an email?
Yes,
You
sir.
can CC me on that, and then you can send Yogesh an email, and then he will make sure that your attendance is recorded for the previous class.
Yes, sir.
Sir, will you, if you can send me that Excel file, I'll just see that whether their name is there or not first.
Okay, Yogesh. I'll do that. So, any questions about today's material? Or somebody had a question about last class's material that I didn't discuss when the question was asked. So, do you want to discuss that now? Are there no further questions? Okay. Maybe the person who had that question has left the class. So, Abhimanyu, so Professor Ghoshal is writing to Abhimanyu whether he had a question or not. Abhimanyu, if you had a question, kindly air it. Okay, so maybe Abhimanyu is not around. I don't know. So in that case,
Jayant, can you hear me?
Yeah, Professor Ghoshal, tell me.
So there is one more hand which is raised called this Rajiv Singh, Rajpal Singh, sorry.
Rajpal Singh, is it? So Rajpal, you have a question?
Actually, I had the same issue with attendance and I forgot to lower my hand later.
Okay. So send an email to Yogesh, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Yogesh, hello, can you hear me, Yogesh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so is there a way to take the attendance somewhere in between? Because then this will solve all these problems.
Sir, somewhere in between, I like Jan sir will just stop for a minute and download the Excel file. That would be the
So maybe 5 minutes into the class, I shall download the Excel file. Okay.
Yes. Then all these issues of leaving early and not there at the end, all such things will be solved.
If like someone will join from between or something, he can tell me like 1 or 2 names I can add there.
Okay. So today was the first day that there was internet outage, Professor Ghoshal. So
yeah, I know.
MMCR doesn't have internet here, and I'm using my my cell phone internet to talk.
Yeah. It is happening in my home also. It is happening very often. So I am, I was also on my phone for a while. Yeah. So I don't know. We have to live with this. I don't know what to do.
Correct. This is part of the experience.
Yes. That is true. Yeah.
Right.
Sir, one more thing is there, like many students did not, means they were having doubt which subject to take, so they did not attend in first 2 class. It happens because, guides and all are not selected. So, means like it would be better if like how we'll sort out this issue, because means many did not attend in first 2 class.
No, that's fine. So Yogesh, don't worry too much about the attendance of the first week. But after this, so I guess from next class onwards, the attendance can be taken and looked at more seriously.
Correct. It's a deadline for registration. After that, we can take it more seriously.
Okay. So I will send one message that we will take the attendance in between, or you can send, Jayant.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay. So how is the pace? That lag between writing and speaking, is that still very annoying?
It is there. But more importantly, Jayant, I don't know what is the solution to that. So sometimes whatever you write is below the screen.
I don't pay attention when I'm writing to aligning this text. Yeah, okay.
So that is in my view, that I could see sometimes that and also Yeah, there is some lag, and this other thing is more important in my view. So when you are writing something and it keeps on going below, we don't know what you are writing.
Okay. I think this is part of I have to, my skill also has to improve. I have I
Is
don't
it
look
possible?
at.
Is it possible to put the camera a little above?
That's possible. Yes.
So you can see all the paper. So you can try once and see whether you can see all the full sheet. Then little bit will be covered by your hand, but that is okay.
No, I thought if we lower it a little bit, then the font will be bigger, so it will be clearer. Whatever I'm writing would be clearer. But downside is if I'm not careful, then I'll just continue writing without the text being visible to the camera.
Yes. So some optimization is required, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'll sign out now in that case. Fine?
Okay, good. Yeah.
Thanks.
So
Bye.
yeah. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, sir.